This is the What Do You Know show hosted by Rio and my co-host Griff.
Yo.
Oh man, and I've told it many times. I've been wanting to do this show like so long. I want to talk about the comedian, rest in peace, Patrice O'Neal.
R.I.P.
A lot of people, in our generation may not even be aware of Patrice O'Neal and his comedy because he was really popping in the early 2000s and he had been going since the 80s.
Really?
Yeah, because it takes a long time for stand-up comics to get a lot of ground, especially because they build the experience of traveling on the road, testing their material, different crowds, see where things land and where they don't land. And so, yeah, he's been going since the 80s and really started to get popping in the early 2000s. And then, unfortunately, he had met his untimely demise, I think it was 2011.
Yeah.
And around that time, it was a huge shift for the country. First black president had been elected, that being Barack Obama, and he had a lot of things to say prior to his election. He wasn't even sure that Obama would be elected, and then he got elected, and he started to see some of the things that Obama was doing that he didn't agree with. And then furthermore, his popularity was bolstered by now canceled Opie and Anthony radio show. They were one of the people, well, a duo, but one of the stations that actually got Sirius XM popping, that being them and Howard Stern. And he was not only a staple on their show, but really made their show great whenever he was on.
I think I've heard maybe 6 or 7 of the Opie and Anthony's, all of them with Patrice O'Neal.
Right.
And I honestly couldn't imagine the show without him on it.
Right.
Honest to
Well,
God.
and that's the thing too. It's I was going to touch on his legacy. We can get into that right now. His legacy, despite his untimely death, has been preserved through people posting YouTube videos of any appearance that he's ever had, basically
Gotta
anywhere.
be thousands of hours of Patrice O'Neal content on the web. So
Yeah.
much. So much.
And another reason why, well, first of all, if you are unaware of Patrice O'Neal, definitely look up Elephant in the Room or Mr. P, some of his great stand-up specials that he had done. The Nasty Show. But if you watch the Nasty Show, you got to be over 18. We are not telling people under 18 to go watch the Nasty Show.
It's called the Nasty Show for a reason, people.
It is. Very raunchy. But one thing I greatly admire and respect about Patrice O'Neal, not just because of his comedy, but of his philosophy. This is the first comedian that we're going to cover on this show, but it's not going to be the last, because comedians, as I was telling you off air, usually are able to dissect problems or uncomfortable issues in our society and make people laugh and make them acknowledge that they exist and can talk about them in an open and honest way.
Yeah.
So I have very recently put you under Patrice O'Neal, but very interestingly though, you were like, yeah, I remember seeing Elephant in the Room on Comedy Central like way back when.
Yeah, it was either Comedy Central or Spike TV. Like that was one of the things that was just on like 8, 9 o'clock. They just play random stuff. And I remember seeing this thinking, man, this cat's really, really funny at like 14 years old.
Yeah.
Not all the jokes are appropriate for a 14-year-old, but he's hilarious. And, I could tell it was kind of older looking, but I'd never seen Patrice O'Neal outside of that. But like even that was a glimpse of, the marvel that is this man.
Right. And I think that's a really great, he definitely is a marvel. I can't really, before I knew Patrice O'Neal, I had ideas about relationships. I had ideas about how you should act, especially as a man with a woman. But then I started listening to this man, and it blows your head, just blows your head out the water, thinking like, well, there's a man out here thinking about how to control a relationship in what he calls a righteous way. And the reason why he talks in that manner is that he usually discusses relationships as being all power is in the woman, and as long as a man is successful, then he can actually get with the woman.
Yeah.
And I had never thought something like that before, really. I mean, but when you get to thinking about, once you hear him talk, especially go and look up his appearances on Opie and Anthony when he discusses these things, you start to think like, well, no, I actually intuited that. I did know that to be true, especially as a young man. Like, we're pressured to achieve, and we're pressured to push the boundary, and especially that we can have maintain and stabilize a household for our women that we would like to get with. And he was able to talk to especially Opie and Anthony, because unfortunately all of his legacy is pretty much preserved in a couple of hours of stand-up specials, but then, like you're just saying, like thousands of hours on him, on the Opie and
just
Anthony
speaking
show.
on life, on everything.
And like they just let him go.
Yeah.
They just, because his philosophy was so deep and complex, they would question it, and then he likens his philosophies upon relationships as if, you know, he's the karate master in a dojo, and then, you know, the women that come in, well, some stick around and some try to get the black belt, some try to get 2 degrees, maybe they try to flip me on my head and I got to come back as the master in the dojo. And he does that with everybody. Like another comic that we want to cover on this show is Bill Burr, and Patrice had gotten his start in Boston with Bill Burr, and Bill Burr just talks about, like, anytime he speaks about Patrice O'Neal, first of all, it's of the highest level of respect, and secondly, it's that you can't be in a room with Patrice O'Neal and, like, own the room. Whether that's a living room or a comedy stage or anything, you can't. His presence is so dominant, and his ideas are so dominant. Because, like, even on Opie and Anthony, like you were just saying, you couldn't even imagine him not like being like an integral member of the show, but he was. And I definitely like want you guys to go and check out Patrice O'Neal's comedy first, and then start to see all the great comics that came, you know, that lived with him and worked with him, and then unfortunately lived past his demise, speak on his greatness.
Yeah.
Even another one I want to cover on this show is Norm Macdonald. Have you ever heard of Norm? We'll
get on that.
I'll learn you some Norm. But Norm was telling other comics that you're trying to fill some shoes of a man that you never met before. And then he would tell about, well, that's Patrice O'Neal. And then even young comics coming up, they're like, well, what are you talking about? Who is that guy? And he's like, you don't even know one of the greatest I've ever seen do it. And you're trying to come in and step in his shoes, and you don't even know what you're trying to do, because he did it 10 times better than you, 10 years earlier than you did it, and you're trying to chase a fairy tale you can never reach. So basically, I had put you on to Patrice O'Neal like kind of recently. What are some of your impressions of Patrice O'Neal?
Well, one of the things I like about him is how he maintains that, like, not necessarily air of dominance, but like his philosophy is stone cold. It's the same whether he's doing stand-up, whether he is answering phone calls on Opie and Anthony about whatever the topic is, or whether he's on Fox News talking about the latest and greatest racial or conflicting or very just uncomfortable situation that Fox News wants Patrice O'Neal to come in and comment on. Mm-hmm. And it's always the same. Like you mentioned, as a comedian, he manages to look at real life situations as they are, and not so much how like the media presents them to be or anything like that, but how they actually are. Like, for example, we were just looking at an interview between what was the doctor's name?
So it was hosted on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News, and it was between Patrice O'Neal, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, who I greatly respect as well, for his intellect, and then a guy named like Willie Armstrong. Who it was kind of a non-factor in the interview. He
had a lot of good things to say.
Well, he very neutral, neutral, right?
Well, anyway, and amidst this situation,
it was covering the Don Imus controversy.
Okay,
that had happened like mid 2000s. Don Imus being a shock jock radio host. Basically, your point is bigger than I just thought I'd give some background. Don Imus had made a nappy-headed hoe comment, like an NCAA women's tournament. A lot of the women were black on the team, and he had made that statement, and really resulted in a lot of controversy and media backlash and his firing and things of that nature. And Patrice was tacitly defending using words.
Yeah, he was defending the First Amendment, but what he was also doing was standing in a sort of like coherently misaligned union of black men, because there's the Fox anchor, and then there's three black men with three very different stances on the situation.
Right.
One is very pro PC, one's neutral, and then Patrice O'Neal, who is, I guess, supposedly supposed to be the freedom of speech guy, like let the guy keep his job.
Right,
but,
or like maybe he would be considered alt-right today by his speech. You know what I'm saying?
But
like,
really, Patrice O'Neal's stance was everybody should get to say what they want to say. Don't try to use me as a means to show that black people are divided on this issue.
Yeah.
And also, since we're talking about freedom of speech, let each one of us say what it is we're trying to say, as opposed to trying to insert your point in halfway through what we've said.
Yeah, and his the greatest thing about that interview that he had done on that show was like, listen, Dr. Lamont Hill, he kept calling him the good doctor. The good doctor is. He said, "Calm down. Let's speak
he said,
real.
You're too serious.
Yeah, you're too serious. Calm down. We got to speak real about this." And he was talking about just. Well, in that, I can even link it in the description if you'd like me to.
That'd be good. Yeah,
I think we should. Yeah, it just kind of shows, and that's a great segue into what I wanted to talk about Patrice. Is like, if he was around today. Cancel culture as it is, you were saying that Dr. Lamont Hill was speaking for the PC crowd, political correctness type crowd. And if Patrice was around today, I don't even think it would have gotten that far, because he would have gotten bigger and bigger and been a voice of like dissent for trying to control how people think, and then how they think, and then how they speak. I think that's a huge part of his legacy as well. By the point of the show, I really just want people to go and check out everything that's free on YouTube to view. And then if you go and buy his specials as it is, it just goes straight to his mom. His mom is still around. They do, Bill Burr has hosted comedy special events solely dedicated. All the proceeds go to Patrice O'Neal's family.
Dope.
Done it annually since his unfortunate and untimely demise, and just out of pure love for the person and marvel of the person, Patrice O'Neal. But like, I really can't stress how much I would have loved to have him as a friend in my life. Imagine Patrice O'Neal being your friend. I
would love to just like have him be like a random radio guy giving me advice on life, like, hey, that's stupid. Or like, you don't need to do all this whoop-de-doo, just tell it like it is. Mm-hmm. Very straight to the point. But like with very, very sound reason, specific to, because he always talks about like I speak fluent man, right? Mm-hmm. So I can understand the man's perspective.
I speak fluent dude.
Yeah. So it's like he understands. He has a very rounded understanding of life from his perspective, right? And so I just learned a word for it when people sort of believe things to be as they are because of who they are. Like Patrice O'Neal is very much the kind of person. It's not a matter of trying to represent like a piece of reality that doesn't really fit in the grand scheme of things. But Patrice O'Neal is very much right here, right now. This is what makes sense.
Yeah.
And it'll continue to make sense because of these reasons. So
just because the fact that reality is going to continue to exist, and he just, as comedians do, and very acutely and very well, criticize our reality. Okay, that's one thing, and then our reality is funneled into the society to which we live in.
Yeah.
And then another thing, like I was just saying about how stand-up comics actually gain notoriety is through their experience in traveling all across, not just the nation and different municipalities, but also across the world, and him having a greater understanding of the world based on the society to which he was born in, then expanded his perspective, and which is his reality, and then was just able to criticize ideas based on what is true, and then how to operate truthfully, because he doesn't say he doesn't operate truthfully. He says he operates righteously. His ideas, you have to come with righteousness. That being, if you are going to say something, it has to be because you have conviction, and your conviction lies within exactly what you'd experienced, and then you criticize other people's experiences and bring them into the fold.
He says a lot of things that is as funny as they are. There is a lot of things he says that I just can't agree with, but I can tell that they are true for him. Like that righteousness shows through. So even if I disagree with it, like that's something to have a conversation piece about, because he righteously believes it and I righteously don't believe it. But that's just fine, because there's no facades on what we're talking about or what's being discussed. He's not giving you falseness because he really believes what he's saying. And a lot of it holds weight, even if it's wrong. A lot of it holds weight, or even if I believe it's wrong, it holds weight. That's
a great point there. Yeah, I was just saying, like, when it comes to if he was still around today in the PC culture that he literally in the mid 2000s was adamantly fighting against,
he would shut PC culture down so quick. And he, because he's a comedian, he could go about doing it in a couple of ways. He could just adamantly say, "That's stupid, stop." He could make very good jokes about it that make, that incept in people's minds, like, hey, this is stupid and it's funny. That is so stupid. Like, why are we really upset about this? It really is funny. Or I guess those are the best two options for him. The other one is he could sit down with a bunch of whoever has an issue with it and just like hash it out. And we could record it and have more great YouTubes of Patrice O'Neal talking to people about their experiences.
Imagine Patrice talking like to anybody that you look up to. Anybody. I would have loved to see him like have a discussion with Malcolm X. How interesting would that have been?
Oh Lord.
Like, and the reason why I say that and bring that up is because as far as I understand Patrice O'Neal, he's a true leader. There are some people in society that have true leadership qualities, that being not being able have the confidence to speak truthfully and honestly about things to which they see in society, and then also backing that up with their own worldview, their own perspective.
Yeah.
And like Patrice, I would have loved to see him, like I told you just off the camera just the other day, I just want Patrice's like perspective on the Donald Trump presidency. If I could have that, I would have loved to see how he would have diagnosed it, because it's not going to be what I think he's going to say. You really can't even imagine what he's going to say. And any of the people out there that go and look up Patrice, we wouldn't even know what he would say about Trump. We don't have that brain. We don't have that. He's a very high functioning and highly intellectual individual that had his career, put in a lane of comedy because he was a funny guy, and he was too smart to like do anything else.
Yeah.
Literally, he was too smart to do anything else but comedy, because he knew, and this is a great quote of his. He said, "I got into the comedy business because I thought it was about funny. It ain't about funny." And he always talked about how you have to kowtow, and this is why he wasn't as big as he should have been at the time to which he was really getting popping, is that he would go and then trash studio executives that wanted to give him a role.
Wow.
He had a huge Spike Lee wanted to give him a movie role, and he told Spike Lee, "Well, talk to my agent." He told Spike Lee, "Talk to my agent."
That's funny.
Well, after 2 missed calls from Spike Lee, by the way, the third time he answered it and said that, and then Spike Lee, he lost the opportunity because he had to Spike Lee was bigger than him in terms of popularity, notoriety, and financial success and all that stuff. But he was like, "You're not bigger than me."
Yeah.
And so call my agent. He lost that. And the conviction of your ideals is what I really do love about Patrice. I really can't speak more highly because, okay, also let me say this as well. Patrice O'Neal is off the chain. He says things that are totally crazy, but you have to have a reason and judge. Like when you judge him, have a reason perspective. Like, okay, this dude is smarter than me. Maybe he's experienced some things that I haven't. And
even if you don't believe that, just keep listening to the things that he's saying in the context that he's saying them. Like more often than not, Patrice O'Neal will say more than one thing that you agree with, which isn't a reason to say that he's right. But he'll go on talking, and you'll find yourself laughing at the things that really are true, and some of those seem to be the most ridiculous ones. But it's just, again, that righteous truth of experiences he's had and things that he's found to be true. And he ties in all the other stuff that sometimes might just be like just his beliefs, but nevertheless he has a way of like leveling what he's saying to almost be universal, which is really, really crazy, really, really crazy. A lot of people feel so highly of themselves and what they stand for that they can't make fun of it, and so like you'll find the conversations between Patrice O'Neal and another person, when that other person is getting very, very upset, it's usually because they take themselves too seriously to laugh at themselves. Yeah. So as soon as Patrice O'Neal starts dogging him out and they get upset, he's gonna keep dogging him out because he knows that not only are they not listening and they're not receptive to what he's saying, but they're not open to the idea of giving back ideas to counter what's even being said about them. Right. They can only get defensive and close in, as opposed to like just laugh about it for a second, take in what was being said, and be like, you know what, part of that might actually be true. They're just too prideful to say, yeah, you might be right about some of that, but the rest of it is wrong because of this, and this. Like they just completely shut down, and it's the funniest thing to watch.
It's so funny. Yeah, exactly. He has the confidence to confront people on basically their
stance, their
the insecurities too. That's what I was gonna. I was gonna instability, but insecurity is the proper term, because he will definitely go right at what's the jugular of what you're saying.
He'll hit it quick.
Yeah,
punch
exactly.
You right in the throat,
and then the fostering of a healthy dialogue that he's really for 9 times out of 10 he's able to have healthy dialogue. But then for those 10% of the people that can't handle that type of forthrightness, it's gonna be hell in a handbasket. It's gonna be so hard for them to deal with that type of a strong. And he's loud. He has a big presence. You can't really, you're already intimidated in your mind just psychologically. And then he comes and it's like, oh man, this dude is also way smarter than me too.
Yeah. Those conversations are always the best, because the ones that I've seen, like there's never the intention of having a healthy discussion. And so like whoever it is that's about to get defensive, like they have a quota to meet. They got to be on air for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. Or maybe they were just so like vehemently upset, and that's the reason that they called. Like there was this one lady on the Opie and Anthony show. She called. Patrice was talking about women. He was talking about his ideas about women and relationships. He was giving people relationship advice, and this lady called, and the first thing she said was, if Patrice O'Neal, you're full of shit, and I'm in a relationship for like 5 years, and my husband, he loves me. And Patrice O'Neal, like he dogged her out. He said, well, what does your husband do?
Trucker.
And he's a trucker. He said, well, that's why you think your husband loves you, because he's
it's a perfect job to get away from a person like you.
Yeah. He's on the road. What do you say, like
8 days out of 7. 8 days out of week out of 7, just to get away from you.
She lost it now, and she just went on and on and on. I was like, she called out of a very upset place, and so she had there was no other intention than for her to just be mad and just direct all that at Patrice O'Neal.
He was like, well, listen to the way you're talking to me. I can't imagine how you're talking to your husband. Yeah. That's why he's driving a truck.
And I always get to thinking, how could you really get upset about something that wasn't true? Like, if it wasn't true, why would you even bother calling? And another thing, why was she listening? Why was she listening to the Opie and Anthony show on an episode about how men and women relationships are? Like, and that's how I knew. It was like the only reason people get defensive at all is if somebody says something that hits. And Patrice O'Neal often hits, because otherwise people are just like, no, that's not true.
He hits the insecurity so acutely. I remember Bill Burr was telling this story about how this is horrible, but there was a guy who had came to their comedy show and was like gonna they were all doing a set like at the Comedy Store, and he was a comic too, but they had never like met him before. He maybe had came from off of the road somewhere else, just doing a stop at the Comedy Store. They never met him before, but he had one of his hands was like a like it wasn't a real, it was a prosthetic hand.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they would never know. But instead of, you know, altering how you would shake someone's hand, Patrice put out the hand that his prosthetic hand would have to you know, respond to, and then Bill Burr was just like going on his mind like, how could you do that to somebody? And then Bill also talked about this instance where a woman that was being real loud and kind of abrasive, just entering the Comedy Store, because he has a lot of that. Kevin Hart came up in the same era that they did. And yeah, so there was this story about this chick who was like really pretty and all that stuff, but she had a scar, like, you know, on the left side of her face, like from whatever, you know. And then Patrice basically, as Bill Burr puts it, he said, "I like that." Pointed right to her scar. He said, "I like that. What'd you do, baby?" And just totally just delved into the insecurity so that he could make, because he always talks about how love and hate is an emotion. I don't really agree with this, but he said love and hate is an emotion. As long as I can make you hate me first, I'm gonna make you love me next.
Wow.
I need that negative energy. I want to see how much I can bring out of you. And then if it's a lot, then I know I can make you love me by flipping the table.
Yeah.
And so, like, have you ever thought about something like that? Have you even considered that type of a perspective? Fantastic. I love people in this world, whether I agree or disagree, that I can say honestly, like, wow, that is so outside of my world paradigm. I'd have never even thought that type of idea could exist. And when I had actually gotten on Patrice O'Neal, I was like, everything this man is like, just when I got into everything he's saying to me is so foreign. It's almost like traveling to a different country, seeing some things you've never seen before. Patrice O'Neal is a journey in your mind that you would never thought, you know, such a thing could exist, but it truly shows the diversity of thought in human beings. And comedians, like we were just saying, I really value their perspective because they're able to take uncomfortable topics in society and make them not only palatable and have a topic for a discussion, but you can laugh about it. So that's the best thing that, and why I would encourage all of our listeners out there, our audience, to like look into Patrice O'Neal. Any like closing comments you want to talk about with how you're, you know, experiencing your Patrice O'Neal?
I would just say that it's definitely something I'm glad to have been put on to.
Right.
Especially like I don't know, now I'm just finding myself in sort of a life transition. Like I'm at that point in my life where I find myself going from like actually being like a young adult to an adult, which is really weird.
Right.
Really weird transition. But like Patrice O'Neal and sort of the dialogue that he has with people is definitely like one of the good things that's been helping me facilitate. There's a lot of things that if you were a kid or like if you were just young in mind, you might not really get it. Like he says a lot of things that are just meant for adults, like grown ass adults that have been through things in life. And so like I kind of find myself like really gravitating towards a lot of things he's saying, and just a lot of the ways that he talks to people and the way that he handles himself in situations, you know, like because you see he's a comedian. He's got a lot of righteous ideas, like he believes what he's saying, but also like he has a lot of positive intentions in the ways that he interacts with people. And that's one of the things that I really like about him is he's not trying to, even when he's dogging somebody out, he's not trying to bring out the animosity in them, so to speak, but he's just trying to feed the interaction so that he can get to the, I guess, the warm fuzzy feelings or just the good, the better vibes between two people. I mean, it's just based on the last point you had. Like if you could make somebody so upset at you in the moment that you meet them, then that just leaves so much potential for plenty more interactions with somebody, as opposed to like having a meek interaction with somebody and then never wanting to talk to them again. Very, very different. So, just stuff
there's
like
power
that.
in it.
Yeah.
He had power, right?
Oh,
exactly. He established the power and the confidence. Well, I mean, I can't encourage our audience enough to not only check him out, but also if you go and buy any of his specials, they're still up, to buy. All the proceeds is going to go to his mom's. And like, I've bought everything I possibly can from him just to solely, if I can have one show of respect post-mortem that I didn't even know about him when he was alive, but now that I've realized him today, and I think his legacy will continue to live on through his words and his actions. And so, I mean, it's a sad way to end it, but I mean, he is an incredible guy. You could, if you really get into the rabbit hole, which it is a rabbit hole, you're gonna see that he talks to so many different people. That being not just Fox News, but also Alex Jones, which is a hugely castigated figure, in the PC culture society that we're living in now. He basically, if he was still alive today, no societal constraint could hold him back. He'd just break through them or burn a bridge, And really, that's the type of courage that men and women too, they need that courage. We need to be able to speak forthrightly and honestly. And I hope that this show, that if nobody has ever heard of Patrice O'Neal, or maybe heard of something about Patrice O'Neal, never really looked into, he has a huge body of work. A lot of it's on YouTube. Go out, check him out. This has been the What Do You Know show. We questioned, what do you know about Patrice O'Neal? Me and Griff are signing off, right? You good? Signing off.